and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup.
And lots of news this week, and you decide whether the country is reaching a tipping point on LGBT rights. Delaware has followed Rhode Island into marriage equality, becoming the 11th state to open marriage to same-sex couples.
Well, maybe the country is just tipping into the Atlantic Ocean.
Or the Pacific, or the Gulf of Mexico.
Well, I'm just pointing out the preponderance of marriage equality states on the East Coast. Although Minnesota may be next at the end of this week.
That'll help balance things out. 2 amendments to cover binational couples have been introduced to the immigration reform bill. By the time you see this, they may have voted on them.
Possibly, but nonetheless, we'll sort out the details of this for you. Bad news, a gay couple was beaten by anti-gay New York Knicks fans in broad daylight right outside Madison Square Garden.
And a street we often walk on day and night. Florida is seeking a new way to stop LGBT groups from meeting in middle schools.
And they're dropping like flies in the NFL, all our friends. The latest is our Minnesota Vikings punter hero, Chris Kluwe, who got cut by the Vikings this week.
The British same-sex marriage bill may be in some jeopardy.
Uh-oh. But good news from St. Petersburg, Russia, where LGBT activists, in spite of all the laws against them, found a way to march openly this week.
And we got a bunch of shows to talk about, including Bette Midler as super agent Sue Mengers on Broadway, a review of male impersonator songs, a review of Weimar Republic songs, and the
Will you be singing?
No. We don't even have any tape here, but you can look these people up on the internet and listen to them if you like. And the Broadway revival of Pippin. I never saw Pippin back in the day, did you?
No. The only
Stephen Schwartz, the guy who did Godspell and Wicked and all those things.
The only show on your list without songs is the Bette Midler show.
That's right, I don't think she sings.
Oh, ironical.
But she does do a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
From her couch.
Stay tuned for that.
Okay. So we start off, well, as we were taping last week, Rhode Island was finishing up its business, and they did finalize it and sign the bill for same-sex marriage.
Rhode Island became the 10th state in the United States to legalize same-sex marriage.
All of New England now.
Yes, plus the District of Columbia. Governor Chafee rushed right off to sign the bill.
He's an independent, by the way. Used to be a Republican.
Yes. Marriages will be available starting August 1st for same-sex couples, but the Bishop of Rhode Island, the Catholic bishop, does not want you attending those weddings.
Well, this is Bishop Tobin. He warned Catholics to think hard before going to a same-sex wedding. It might harm their relationship with God and cause significant scandal to others. He says Catholics should reflect on the fact that we're in a post-Christian era, he says. This is unbelievable, into which we clearly have now entered. He says he referred to the serious regression of the public morality of our state. Now, this is Rhode Island we're talking about, you know, which is a very politically corrupt state over the years.
Extremely.
I have people up there. I'm not blaming them.
Well, it's known for some being the home of several segments of the mafia, and also being the home of the manufacturer of school rings.
Oh, really?
Yes. There's a large school ring jewelry industry up there.
Well, it's also a very pretty state, I must say.
It is, and I've spent many hours there.
As is Delaware.
Yes. And Delaware became, because, you know, keep your scorecards handy, the 11th state this week to legalize same-sex marriage for for same-sex couples.
Now, they voted in the Senate here. It was a 12-9 vote, so it was touch and go there. And Governor Jack Markell. We have the scene there, the scrum on the stairs, I assume, of the legislature there.
Well, it's everybody. It's everybody who came out to watch the vote. It took him about 30 seconds after the bill was passed by the Senate 12-9
Before
to
the
sign
ink was dry
he
on the
didn't
bill.
He didn't even go to his office. He just signed it right there on the stairs.
Wow. But you can't start registering to marry there until July 1st, when they will start taking applications.
That's still a month before Rhode Island.
Yeah.
And in the midst of the debate in the Senate, and they were a little...
then Delaware is going to be the 10th state, and Rhode Island is going to be
Delaware was the 11th state to pass
Yes,
it,
to pass
but it will precede Rhode Island in the availability of marriages. A couple of things about Delaware. First of all, there was some question right up until the end about whether or not the Senate would vote for it.
12-9.
Yes,
That's
but
close.
there were a couple of senators who had refused to announce which way they were going to vote, and we sort of got the idea close to the vote that they were going to vote yes, but they did not want to be publicly known as headed in that direction.
Oh, it's just a lot of trouble to be publicly known.
For anything. Although, in the midst of the debate, one of the senators, I want to get this right, Karen Peterson, came out.
Yep.
She has been with her partner for 24 years.
Oh.
Yeah, one wonders
Who
how
knew?
much of a secret it was. But she got up and made a speech about wanting the rights that heterosexual couples have, and that people should not feel threatened by the fact that she and her partner would now have these rights.
Well, the lesbian teacher in Ohio who got fired from the Catholic high school because it was announced in the obituary for her mother that she had a partner named Julie. Apparently they were fine with that, not knowing or whatever. Maybe they did know, but seeing something in print seems to make a difference. More about that later.
Well, and that's why the senators who voted yes didn't want to preview their votes. But lest you think we can take a breath, in fact, in Minnesota this week, by the time you see this show, may already have become the 12th state to pass same-sex marriage.
Because it's moving fast, and it was announced that the House would vote on Thursday, which is the day after we tape, and the tougher vote was supposed to be in the House, not the Senate.
Right.
So that means they weren't going to bring it up if they didn't have the votes in the House. So it is assumed to be a done deal.
And then the Senate...
Unless Bishop Tobin's God interferes in history.
And the Senate would then take it up within a day or two, maybe this weekend, whatever, and the governor is behind it. And so Minnesota, after, we had that huge fight last year about whether they were going to pass a constitutional amendment in the state against same-sex marriage, and we really had to work really hard, and by we, I mean, of course, the people of Minnesota, to prevent that from passing. And then suddenly, when that passes, boom, we're on to legalizing same-sex marriage.
We know we had lost all of these votes in the past, except that one in Arizona where they also included domestic partners, and then they passed an amendment against marriage in Arizona. So we'd lost all those, and then we won the 4. And a lot of us said, "Oh, this is the turning point.
Yep.
We're going to." And I was a little nervous because that was a presidential election year. I think Maggie Gallagher had a point, and I worried that they would get a victory later on, although they've kind of
So you were wrong?
No. I'm worried that they kind of run out of states. Well, I wouldn't get too triumphalist yet. I mean, now, we talked about Pennsylvania before the show. They're getting their gay LGBT rights bill reintroduced this week with a lot of sponsors. But they're also getting an amendment against same-sex marriage that's going to be voted on. And again, we don't feel threatened by that. But I'm saying these things are still out there. And all I'm saying is, I am not confident that we would still win every vote in every state where these things came up.
Well, I think it won't come up in a majority of the states, and we're going to reach the end of our little rope pretty soon of states that still have the possibility of legalizing same-sex marriage. Minnesota would be 12. Illinois looks like a near possibility.
Even though Pat Brady, the chair of the state Republican Party there, who had come out for same-sex marriage, has now resigned. So there are consequences to standing up for us sometimes.
Well, within the party, within the Republican Party, there, which is not a dominant party in Illinois. So Illinois looks possible. Where's the other place? Oh, no, that was Rhode Island. California looks possible.
New Jersey.
Either with the Supreme Court rejecting Prop 8 and therefore reinstating marriage, or if the Supreme Court, for some strange reason, upholds Prop 8, going back to the ballot to have the voters repeal Prop 8. That looks really possible. So I would say either in a month or in a year, California should have marriage equality reinstated.
Nevada.
Nevada is moving forward, and that looks very possible, although they have a longer-term effort because they have to repeal a state constitutional amendment, and that takes 2 sessions of the legislature plus a voter referendum,
So
although there's also a court case being appealed there, and we have New Jersey, which could have it done in the legislature, overriding Christie's veto of marriage, or in the courts where it also is.
And what would be left to us? I mean, at least in Wyoming, they defeated a bill to put a constitutional amendment on the ballot, which was nice.
Well, I don't know. Oregon, that might be possible. I mean, as you look around the map, you find maybe other states that you think by reputation and their presidential votes or whatever, you might have a chance of passing it. But I do think we're going to hit a brick wall at some point, and it is going to be up to the Supreme Court to say either we've reached a critical mass and therefore it has to be legal everywhere.
And we need uniformity,
Yeah, exactly.
as our friends on the right would say.
Well, it's interesting to think about what impact these recent legalizations in states will have on the Supreme Court, which just a couple of months ago was hearing the arguments. And in the meantime, several states have legalized same-sex marriage.
It could reinforce for the right-wingers this idea that gays have political power and they can work this out on their own and we don't have to interfere in history. We'll leave that to God.
Or it could make the Supreme Court say it is safer now, because clearly public opinion is changing, for us to go ahead and mandate the legalization of same-sex marriage nationally, let alone getting rid of DOMA Section 3 and forcing the federal government to recognize these marriages, or, you know, getting rid of Prop 8. It opens the door. I still think that's an unlikely door for them to walk through, but a month from now, they have the possibility of walking through the door of mandating same-sex marriage legality for the entire country, as they did with interracial marriages in Loving v. Virginia.
In the meantime,
Yes.
in the immigration bill, they actually are seeking on a federal level to make an exception to DOMA for married same-sex couples, whether from abroad or elsewhere.
Now, this is a new strategy, because what has been proposed all along in this Uniting American Families Act, which has been the congressional act that has been proposed in several consecutive Congresses now, was to say, because the federal government won't recognize these same-sex marriages and treat same-sex couples the same as they do heterosexual binational couples, we are going to have a little device here. We're going to create this category called permanent partners, and we will define same-sex couples as permanent partners they can be recognized.
And in fact, it's not a new strategy. It's what every Western nation that started recognizing same-sex relationships did before they actually codified them for people in their own countries.
Well, it's new in this.
I'm thinking of Britain and other places. Before they had any domestic recognition of same-sex partners, they said you can bring your foreign partner in. I don't know why. I don't know why they did that, but they did that.
That was, and we were ahead of them of European countries, for instance, on adoption. Different places have had different standards.
Different strokes for different folks.
So this has been the proposal all along, this permanent partners
construction.
Thank you. But what happened this week was something new. Senator Patrick Leahy, a Democrat of Vermont, has been the guy in charge of getting this into the immigration bill, because he runs the Senate committee that's handling the immigration bill. And he's been a big champion of including same-sex binational couples in the legislation. So what he did, this was the week when senators had to announce and register the amendments they were going to propose to the bill.
By Tuesday at 5 o'clock.
So
they did.
So Senator Leahy, as expected, proposed the addition by amendment of the Uniting American Families Act.
To which Marco Rubio, who was one of the Republicans in the Gang of Eight that is fashioning this bill, said that would be a deal breaker. It would kill the bill.
Lindsey Graham, closeted gay man, said, how dare they come up with this?
Who do they think they are?
Yeah, he used even worse language. But Senator Leahy, at the last minute, threw everyone a little curveball. He said, not only am I going to propose an amendment that includes permanent partners in this immigration reform bill, I am actually going to propose an amendment that would force the federal government to recognize same-sex married couples.
Yes.
And this will be an explicit exception to the Defense of Marriage Act.
A carve-out.
Yes.
And actually, it pleased Senator Feinstein of California very much. He said, this is a lot easier to defend than this vague category of permanent partners where people think you're just going to drag anybody in and you have no legal relationship to them.
Well, this reinforces the system of heterosexual hierarchical hypocrisy that I've always objected to.
Exactly. And this raises another issue for me, which is, my goodness, the first married people we're going to recognize federally are binational couples. Love them, fine. But, it's just like the first people to get civil rights protections from the federal government were the military. What about the rest of us, et cetera?
Well, what it does is it draws this line in the sand again. If you want your non-U.S. partner to be given status in this country,
you're going to have to get married.
You have to get married.
Yeah.
Now, some people objected on the grounds that,
what if you're just dating?
What if then you don't get privileges.
Right.
Privileges go to the people who sign on to the traditional system.
And that's true for heterosexuals.
Exactly. So that's what Feinstein likes. Feinstein. But some are objecting that not everybody will have access to marriage rights. People won't be able to travel. I think this is somewhat of a
well, of course, in Saudi Arabia, they have access to
argument.
the death penalty, so they can claim asylum if they want.
But, they're saying if you live in the South, it may cost you too much to go somewhere to get married and whatever. I think that's a lame argument against this. I think there are. Well, I think there are real arguments to be made about this system that draws such a stark line in the sand about you have to get married. But
and the other thing that was introduced this week was the adoption and foster parenting bill.
By the way, I'm sorry, I have to insert that President Obama was traveling to Mexico and Costa Rica this week, and he was asked in a press conference in Costa Rica how he felt about inclusion of same-sex binational couples in the immigration reform bill. And Jay Carney and the White House press staff have basically avoided this question for the last few weeks. And Obama spoke up and said he was in favor of including same-sex couples in the immigration
bill. He also
bill.
said he would sign the bill if it does not include that.
Right.
So that's so it's not, and most of the major LGBT groups are saying the same thing. That if we don't get in it, we're still for the immigration reform bill because it's important.
I would agree with that.
Right.
And because it does affect LGBT people all over the place with asylum and naturalization and everything. And if you want more information about this issue, you can go to immigrationequality.org, which is the main organization pushing this, and you can find more information there.
Okay.
But on to the adoption question.
Well, it's a federal bill that's been introduced that prohibits discrimination based on sexual, it's called Adoption and Foster Parenting Bill, based on sexual orientation, gender identity, or marital status in programs that receive federal funding. Now, Paul,
I thought it was called the Every Child Deserves a
that's
Family
the name
bill.
of it. Yes, I'm just trying to, that's just hype. Paul Ryan, the Republican nominee for vice president, you might remember him. He said about a week or two ago that he would not oppose gay adoption, but his office would not give his position on this bill that would protect it.
It's so interesting how they, in theory, sort of vaguely support the idea that there are a lot of orphans who need homes.
Well, I haven't read the bill. I haven't had time to read the bill.
Yeah.
And I have to wait to see how it pans out.
Yeah.
But Thomas Ogletree isn't waiting. He's a big guy in the Methodist Church, a big minister there. He was actually head of the Yale Divinity School. And his church forbids homosexuality, forbids same-sex marriages and things like that. But he had a son who's gay, and he did it for him.
Performed the marriage ceremony.
Yes, he presided over the wedding, and he's in a lot of trouble with the church. And there seems like
this is Hillary Clinton's church too.
Yeah. Well, that's the reason that she gave all these years for not supporting same-sex marriage. Anyway, so he's in trouble and may face a church trial. And if they don't change the policy, he's guilty. They've thrown people out before for doing things like this, but he felt he was called to do this. And he says you have to break laws sometimes in order to advance things, like Bradley Manning.
We'll get to that. The Supreme Court of Iowa, which has been under heavy attack by the Republican Party there for legalizing same-sex marriage.
They want to take away their money.
Well, yes,
their
they
salaries.
do. And yet, the new court, because they got rid of 3 of the members, but the new court, also 7-0, which was the same unanimous vote they took with previous justices on marriage, has ruled that the Iowa Department of Public Health must list both married lesbian partners, spouses, as parents of a child born during the marriage.
Well, how could you not do that? It would be chaos if you didn't do that.
Well,
They're married.
This goes back to, again, the sort of nonsensical but property-based system of a child born to a heterosexual married couple is believed to be the child of those two parents, no matter the evidence to the contrary.
So now this, of course, will be a requirement. I mean, if you're born into a married same-sex couple, both people become your parents.
Yes.
No matter who you were.
And the fact is they are your parents. They may not be the actual biological contributers to the DNA of the child, but they are the parents.
Right.
And so listing them as the parents on the birth certificate also makes sense.
I don't know if we should get into this, but what if, like, one of the women had an affair or something with a guy and brought a child in?
But what I'm telling you is, in a heterosexual couple, if a woman has an affair, Prince Harry. And the affair guy is the father of the child.
What do you mean? Oh, you mean Prince Harry being the
product of an affair.
Right.
Perhaps.
Yeah, he looks an awful lot like that redhead, yeah.
Yeah, although Hewitt says, I didn't even get involved with her till after Harry was born. Yeah, right. But if you have a heterosexual married couple and a child is born to that woman, even if you know that the biological father of that child is the affair guy,
you are responsible?
The married husband is on the birth certificate as the parent of that child.
Yes, but what about legal obligations of the biological father from the outside?
You'd have to go to court to demand that.
Yeah.
You might be able to establish that,
Right.
but I'm saying the assumption is that any child born to a married couple, that married couple are listed on the birth certificate
So
as
if
the
they
parents.
do a DNA test on Harry, does he lose his place in the line of succession? And if he's Hewitt's?
I want to know. I want to know how they have avoided doing a DNA test on him.
Somebody gets
he touches things. People could take a glass.
I know.
And get something from Hewitt too.
And you can get a DNA test online for $99. I learned.
It's astonishing. The Supreme Court of Michigan has upheld health insurance benefits for unmarried partners, gay and straight. They say it's a gender-neutral law and it does not violate the state constitutional amendment. There's a very strong chapter of the American Family Association in Michigan, and a guy there, Gary something, who has been running that chapter for years and going after anything gay-related, and they passed a state constitutional amendment against same-sex marriage or any benefits like that. And so we've had to fight tooth and nail in Michigan for anything, and this Michigan Supreme Court has now upheld the idea of benefits, so that's good. And Nevada will have a committee hearing, or had it this week on Thursday, the second hearing on their attempt to repeal the constitutional amendment against marriage.
We have pit bulls in our community. I mean, Michael Petrelis, you take a trip, if you're an official in San Francisco and you take a trip and you don't report it properly, Michael will find out and make sure you file the right forms. More about him later, or now if you want.
All right. Well, while we're on marriage, for Mother's Day coming up this Sunday, the New Yorker did a cover with two moms.
We have a picture of
we
that.
have a closer up
There
picture.
it is.
There it is. Now, some are complaining that the woman in the blue robe is a little androgynous, and therefore this isn't as explicit as it could be. But
what do you want them to be doing?
Two moms. It's and the kids are sort of peeking around the
cute.
corner
It's
because
sweet.
they gave their moms a card and flowers. It's very sweet. Yeah.
It's very sweet.
Thank you to Chris Ware, the cartoonist, who did that.
But not all the news in New York is good. We actually, we skipped over the couple that was attacked. This was a gay couple. We have a picture of them, if we can go back to that.
There they are.
This was a gay couple that was gay bashed by Knicks fans, New York Knicks fans, basketball. This past Sunday, in broad daylight, 8th Avenue between 34th and 35th, right near across from the post office there, at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, knocked to the ground, beaten by the crowd shouting anti-gay slurs. This is Nick Porto and Kevin Atkins, and Kevin broke his wrist and can't do his job now. So if you know anything about this, call Crime Stoppers for sure. The suspect, sorry we don't have a picture of him, but 26-foot brown hair and a tattoo on his left forearm. Last seen wearing a white t-shirt, white sneakers, jeans, and a Knicks number 7 jersey. So if you know anybody like that, turn them in.
You can also go to the Anti-Violence Project website, avp.org, for more information about this and to report this. I was disappointed a little in a statement by the guys who were attacked, who said, "We had no idea this kind of thing still happened."
Well, they actually said they're from Brooklyn, and they said we watch ourselves a little bit more in Brooklyn, although there are plenty of safe areas in Brooklyn, for God's sakes. But they're right above Chelsea. They're practically in Chelsea there, which is a gay neighborhood. It's just not something that they thought of. They felt completely safe, and now they've lost their sense of safety. But this can happen anywhere. It can happen in my building.
They also berated themselves for causing it by talking back to these guys. Evidently, they were on the street, and it's above the post office. It's above 34th Street. And these guys were harassing them and calling them names, and they turned around and said, why are you doing that or whatever? No big deal.
Right.
And then they got beaten up.
Well, I give lip to people who shout slurs, and you're right, it is taking a chance. And what are we supposed to do?
I do it a lot less than I used to.
Well, we're getting older.
I used to, when people would litter on the streets.
Oh, yes. Pick that up.
I'd pick it up.
You dropped something.
Yes. I'd pick it up. I'd walk up to them. I'd tap them on the shoulder, and I'd say, I think you dropped something.
Are you nervous about that now, that
Yes.
you're going to get hit?
I don't do anything to people on the street anymore.
Because people are quite crazy.
Yes.
And if you visit our town.
And they could have guns.
If you visit our town, you should be aware of this. Well, I always
any town. I always get a
little nervous in the subway because men tend to sit with their legs spread wide, obviously because whatever they have is enormous and they can't close their legs. But seriously, I mean, this is the symbol that men are giving out, and they're taking up 3 seats. So I just go like this when I see them, and just like you're gonna, and they like. Oh, like I'm going to have to let someone sit next to me and things like this. But I haven't gotten hit yet.
I sit down and I spread my legs. So I can have more room. Let's talk about Cardinal Dolan.
Oh. Well, Cardinal Dolan did a blog post. And
everyone thinks Cardinal Dolan is this jolly, happy guy. He's sort of the Santa Claus of New York.
And he's the head of the Catholic bishops because he's one of the most conservative bishops,
exactly.
Which is saying something.
Yes.
So he does a blog post where he says, look, we welcome everybody. Anybody.
All are welcome.
You had an abortion, you killed somebody, whatever it is. Gay, everybody. But just like when I was a kid and I brought my friend Freddie, and I'm not sure if it was Freddie, I brought my friend Freddie over, and my mother said, Freddie, you're going to sit and eat with us. You have to wash your hands. Your hands have to be clean.
I thought it was Daddy who said that.
Well, maybe it was Daddy, but I'm paraphrasing.
Yes.
So New Ways Ministry, which stands up for us to some extent,
yes.
Says this is outrageous, and they go to St. Patrick's this weekend with
because what
dirty hands.
What he was saying by that story was, you can all come, but you have to renounce your sins, including gay people.
Right.
You have to not practice your feelings. You have to. That's how you have to wash your hands.
So they go to the cathedral. Well, the cops, which is outrageous, and the St. Patrick's security are standing there checking people's hands, or at least, and threw them out and said you can't come in.
Because
to the church, you've got dirty hands.
They went up to the church specifically with ashes on their hands, and the cathedral had called the cops to say, keep these people out. Now, I want to tell you, I still have a restraining order against me for the cathedral action 24 years ago.
As does Dignity New York, which is the gay Catholic group.
Yeah.
They're not allowed to demonstrate. Matt Foreman was the head of Dignity in those days and led silent witnesses in the church. And the Cardinal O'Connor got a restraining order against them, partly because during one of their silent witnesses, there was another AIDS action, where Michael Petrelis, my friend in San Francisco, gets mentioned again, came in and started screaming about what was going on.
As he did during the ACT UP demonstration, which was planned as a very controlled, quiet demonstration. It was.
Except for the guy who threw the host on the floor.
No, that was, first of all, after the action. And he went up to take communion, and he was handed the wafer, and as a spontaneous act of grief,
he let it drop.
Crumbled it in his hand and let it drop to the floor.
All right, a lot of history to review, but the point is, and Michael had a legitimate grievance with the church too. It was over Cardinal O'Connor being appointed to Reagan's AIDS Commission, but that ended those protests. And Dignity is not allowed to go in. You're not allowed to go in. So not everybody is welcome in the cathedral.
Far from it.
I once went in with a friend on a Sunday who wanted to go to Mass. I went with her. I didn't want to just stay outside. And people came up, this lawyer came up to me. "Are you here to cause a disturbance, Andrew?" I said, "No, my friend wants to go to church."
Meanwhile, he has talked about all are welcome, and the church needs a new way of speaking to people and everything. And so people have tried to take him up on that and have requested a meeting.
They haven't heard from him.
Completely ignored all requests for a meeting.
Now, I'm most disturbed by the cops being involved with that.
Of course.
Checking hands.
But that's,
What the hell is that?
When we did the ACT UP demonstration in the cathedral, the mayor was inside, the chief of police,
Ed Koch was the mayor at the
police
time.
commissioner was inside. There were cops in uniform. There were cops in plain clothes. They brought police dogs into the cathedral before the action to sniff for bombs.
And they had probably a purification right after you left.
Oh, my God. It was just horrible.
All right. Well, I'll tell you something else horrible that's happened. I don't mean to stay on New York too much.
Yeah.
But in Brooklyn, the district attorney's office has a gang unit headed by a woman named Deanna Rodriguez. Now, she has been suspended for 3 months without pay for hectoring a female paralegal with anti-gay slurs in an email and making physical threats using the words faggot and dyke. A law enforcement source said she's a wild woman, she's nuts. And there hasn't been a word on whether she's coming back, but she made an abject apology, which the Anti-Violence Project seems to have accepted. But I can't believe if she had used in print, in an email, the N-word, or any of these other things, or anti-Jewish slur, or something like that she would have any chance of coming back.
Well,
and I don't know if we should be so ready to accept this apology.
Well, here's my evidence to the contrary. I know people who work in the Brooklyn DA's office, and I made a point of asking them, what's with this woman? What's the story here? And they, who shall remain anonymous, said she's been doing this for 25 years, and she has gotten away with it. The administration, none of the administrations in this office have stopped her, and she has been totally out of control.
Is she good with gangs? That's her job.
That I don't know.
And then there's...
Yes, I think they say she is. She's good at her job, but she is really outrageous in the way she treats people.
And then there's Neil Ferguson, the Harvard historian, British guy. Somebody wrote an article about him saying there's wrong, there's very wrong, and then there's Neil Ferguson. He was speaking to a group of 500 financial advisors and went on this tirade against John Maynard Keynes, saying, oh, during World War I, he didn't care about the future because he's gay and he didn't have any kids and all this kind of stuff. So he gets caught, and people speak up. Somebody in the 500 said, that's terrible, and he's exposed. So he issues this unqualified apology. I was just wrong. I'm not going to make any excuse. I was just wrong. Well, he's been doing it for years, making these references about Keynes.
And
he happens to be a very close friend of Andrew Sullivan's.
Well, he is not the only one who talks this way about Keynes, who's getting piled on about. This is the dispute between the people who believe in stimulating the economy with more government spending and those who want to strangle it with cuts. And Keynes evidently was a stimulus guy, and I'm not an economist. And the Republicans and Neil Ferguson and George Will and all these people are, strangle it and cut, which is, by the way, driving European economies into the toilet.
Greece.
And
Spain,
people are now waking up to
Britain.
the fact there that they need more stimulus. So that's the basis of all this.
All right.
Let's move to sports.
Okay.
Chris Kluwe, cut by the Vikings, says...
He says it's not because of his outspokenness, but because of inconsistent... Oh, they say it's not because of his outspokenness, but because of inconsistent performance. And he still hopes to play, and he has no regrets over his activism. But he sent a text message to NBC saying it's a shame that in a league where with players given multiple second chances after arrests, including felony arrests, that speaking out on human rights has a chance of getting you cut. So I think there's a sensitivity here.
I think there's an unknown factor here. We don't know whether the team decided he was too much trouble because he was outspoken. He has a good overall record, but he had a pretty lousy year. He's only 31 years old, so there is some hope that he will be picked up by another team. But here we have Brendan Ayanbadejo, cut by the Ravens. He's a little older. Kluwe cut by the Vikings. Jason Collins.
Will he get picked up? Won't he get picked up in the NBA?
Will any of these guys get jobs? I would say if none of them get jobs, then I would start to say that it has something to do with their outspokenness.
Well,
but,
Brittany Griner got a job. She was the top pick in the draft last month.
Yes, but she's a woman.
Okay.
No,
But, you know,
it's the male leagues that have been more punitive. Now, it's also true.
Top pick. Not just pick, but top pick. Not controversial.
She's not the first
well, she wasn't out
woman
then, was she?
in sports who has been out.
31 years, Martina Navratilova will remind you.
But we should also remind you about Glenn Burke, who was a baseball player who died of AIDS.
Invented the high fives, right?
Did. And played for the LA Dodgers and the Oakland A's and was reasonably successful, was out to his teammates and friends, not out to the general public, but was out on his teams and to his friends. So first of all, should he be given credit for being...
Did he play for Tommy Lasorda?
Yes,
Tommy
who
Lasorda
got rid of him because he was out.
Yeah, Tommy was pretty anti-gay and had a gay son who died of AIDS, I believe.
Who he still does not admit was gay. But should Glenn Burke be given more credit than he has been given?
Well, who says there are no second acts? Are you finished with sports?
For the moment,
Who says there
unless
are no?
I find something
who
else.
says there are no second acts? Remember Carl Palladino, who was
Yes.
the anti-gay bigot, who was the Republican nominee for governor of New York against Andrew Cuomo in 2010? Well, he just got himself elected to the Buffalo School Board overwhelmingly in a big turnout election.
Well, he had some good qualities.
Oh, well, what did you want to remind me?
I've forgotten, but I'll try to.
I followed him in the
research that.
Columbus
Yeah,
Day
yeah,
parade.
Yeah.
That's with you.
Yeah.
And he, every time I asked a question, he said, "Get a job." That's what he kept saying.
I
to
told
me.
you he had good qualities. All right,
He had a point.
Let's go to San Francisco. They had a fight over whether they're going to rename the airport for Harvey Milk. They turned that down, but now there's a revived effort to name one of the terminals at the airport, 3 domestic, 1 international. One of them may end up being named after
Maybe we
Harvey
could get
Milk.
a plane.
Or a ramp.
Oh, man.
But meanwhile, we've been following this question about the San Francisco Pride March and whether Bradley Manning currently in U.S. prison for leaking documents classified documents to WikiLeaks, would stand as the honorary Grand Marshal,
And
picked
again-
by the former Grand Marshals, then thrown out by the San Francisco Pride Committee.
Right.
So
they had their
monthly meeting or
monthly
whatever, the
meeting.
San Francisco Pride Committee.
125 people showed up, and at first they were keeping everybody out. Then a
Yeah.
few people got in, then a bunch of people got in, including Daniel Ellsberg, who shows up. Daniel Ellsberg, one of our all-time heroes,
Yep.
who leaked the Pentagon Papers 100 years ago during the Vietnam War.
Hey, I was at the Pentagon Papers hearing at the Supreme Court.
Okay.
It wasn't 100
Oh,
years
not quite,
ago.
not quite 100, not quite 100. Well, time. Anyway,
Yes.
so again, Michael Petrellis got inside and complained about the corporatization of Pride, pushing out social justice activists who want it to be about housing, healthcare, job protection. These are the things we should be fighting for.
It doesn't look like the Pride Committee paid any attention to Ellsberg, Petrellis, or anyone else.
And a viewer wrote to, and we will dialogue about this, to disagree with us about Bradley Manning, and there are certainly varying opinions, but I think he has done more to expose the evils of a lot of foreign policy. I mean, after all, we live in a country where, George Bush has just been given a big library when he should be in jail. You want to talk about somebody who should be in jail for fighting a war that has killed hundreds, millions of people, totally unjustified. Not that it could maybe ever be justified, but it's certainly in his case. And people aren't upset about that.
I was a little horrified to read the viewer's statement that how can you expect to run a war where civilians aren't killed? That's why I don't want us running wars. But as we said last week, there is a huge, deep division in the LGBT community about Bradley Manning. Happily, we agree, but I would certainly acknowledge
Sure.
that the split is like 50-50
Yeah.
if you read the blog posts and the comments from people.
Well, look, it's free speech. They've had Bradley Manning contingents in the parades around the country for a while, and we can join them or not join, or you can protest them because this is America, the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Let's hopscotch a few headlines and then move on
Okay,
to
well, in Florida, we
international
told
news.
you that Lake County schools caved to the ACLU, and we're going to let a middle school have its gay-straight alliance. Now, according to a viewer, Governor Rick Scott is trying to reclassify middle schools as elementary schools to end run the court precedents that say that this only applies to secondary schools. The ACLU says it's going to press on with this regardless. And then Governor Rick Perry compared anti-gay activists to abolitionists and said we were the flavor of the month, gay rights.
Yeah, well, get used to us. A sports footnote in the Jason Collins case. And by the way, Oprah interviewed Jason Collins and his twin brother and the whole family last weekend. It was predictable, but nice to see them. But Howie Kurtz, who is the media critic who has worked for the Washington Post, and you see him with a show on CNN, Reliable Sources, and has written for the Daily Beast. He wrote a column when Jason Collins did his piece in Sports Illustrated that said, how dare Jason Collins not talk about his fiancée, and he didn't tell her, and he didn't reveal any of this.
How dare Howard Kurtz call himself a journalist?
Well, he didn't even read the piece closely enough because it was right there in the Sports Illustrated
Oh,
piece.
God, it sounds like something I would do.
He's apologized.
He lost his job.
He at the
With
Daily
one of them.
Beast,
One of
at the
them.
Daily Beast, because he was wrong.
Yeah. In Seattle, veteran out gay Senator Ed Murray is running for mayor of Seattle.
Ah, interesting. As we referred to earlier, the legislature in Pennsylvania has gotten for the umpteenth time a proposal for a statewide sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, non-discrimination law. Pennsylvania's had a hard time passing things like this. I don't know that we should be too optimistic
And
about
New
that,
York-
but if you know better, let us know.
And New York has trouble passing a transgender rights bill
Yep.
in the state Senate, which is controlled by rogue Democrats and Republicans.
They're all going to jail.
Yeah, everybody's going. Well, that'd be nice, and we
Yeah.
can start over again.
I
But the
hope.
Williams Institute estimates that discrimination versus transgender people costs New York $1 million in state Medicaid expenditures and $5.9 million in federal and state housing program expenditures.
And something called the National Surveys of Family Growth, which is an ongoing national study, looked at men having sex with men and compared 2002 to 2010 and says that men having sex with both men and women have fewer partners these days, that are still not using condoms a lot, 57% no condoms in their last sexual experience, less IV drug use, and more having HIV tests.
And we told you that New York State also got one of those bills banning conversion therapy for minors, people under 18. Well, I did a story about it for Gay City News and found out that they have, the sponsors, Deborah Glick, out lesbian assembly member, and Brad Hoylman in the Senate, out gay, they haven't really lined up a whole coalition behind this yet. I'm not, well, we'll have to see what will happen. But
well, given the impossibility of passing other stuff, it seems unlikely, but we'll see. At Smith College, where they're still having a fight over whether they should have admitted a female transgender applicant.
They got to study it.
Yeah, they have a committee they put together. And in Texas, a dozen members of Get Equal, the activist group, staged a sit-in at Senate offices for a non-discrimination statewide bill. 5 of them got arrested, so that's still taking place.
All right.
International news.
Well, in France, you know, they passed the same-sex marriage bill, but an out gay mayor there, Thierry Spitel, announced that he would marry his partner and adopt his child. So he got bullets in the mail with anti-gay slurs.
Unbelievable.
And the socialist president of the lower house also got threats, Claude Bartolone, a letter containing gunpowder. So this is really, it's shown on the underside there in France.
Yeah, it's some ugly stuff.
We used to get death threats all the time, you know.
No, we didn't.
No, it's true.
In Uruguay, to talk about better news, the marriage law that was passed there a few weeks ago has been promulgated and signed, and marriages will start, same-sex marriages will start in Uruguay August 1st at the latest. They may even start a little earlier.
In the United Kingdom, the Tories, the Conservatives, are pressuring their Prime Minister, David Cameron, to kill the same-sex marriage bill. They say it is driving Tory voters to the UK Independence Party, UKIP, which is further to the right.
Yes.
So they're, you know, and this could be killed in the House of Lords for at least for a year if they so choose to do that.
And the Conservative ruling party is also in trouble because one of their members, a cabinet member, Nigel Evans, who is the out gay deputy speaker of the House of Commons.
Very popular guy.
Very popular.
Had been married to a woman, I believe, for a long time and then came out late.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah.
But he has now been charged with rape and sexual abuse
by two
men.
But you know, and we
from
were
some years ago.
We were just going to report that because he was arrested. Now, being arrested over there just means that the police take you in and they talk to you.
Yeah.
So he is totally, well, we want to show you what he had to say about it. If we have that tape of Nigel Evans.
Yes.
There.
Denying the allegations.
Yes.
Here it comes.
Good morning. Yesterday I was interviewed by the police concerning 2 complaints, one of which dates back 4 years, made by 2 people who are well known to each other and who until yesterday I regarded as friends. The complaints are completely false and I cannot understand why they have been made, especially as I have continued to socialize with one as recently as last week. I appreciate the way the police have handled this in such a sensitive manner, and I'd like to thank my colleagues, friends, and members of the public who have expressed their support and, like me, a sense of incredulity at these events. Thank you very much.
Well, so
we don't know what to think.
Right.
Because we don't have any information about that. In Toronto, Canada, a real estate agent has been fired because he handed out brochures, real estate brochures, and included the Regnerus study in it.
Right.
Really?
Yeah, that's the anti-gay study against gay families.
The thing about how, children of gay families, except
They are worse.
they weren't really gay families, and the guy who wrote the study has admitted that it's not a valid study.
Well, they fired
but he
him.
includes it in a real estate brochure.
They fired him.
He's been fired, and he said he didn't mean to hurt anybody.
Oh, yeah. Cardinal Dolan doesn't mean to hurt anybody either. This wants you to wash your hands.
We've been following for some years developments in Russia in terms of LGBT people and activists and laws.
Well,
and
the parliament is on the verge of passing a countrywide ban on gay propaganda, what they call gay propaganda. They say it's to protect children, but it's about shutting up anybody from speaking out on gay rights.
even being gay in public, we fear, could be
Right.
a problem. So this national law is coming on the heels of several cities that have passed similar laws.
It's very popular.
Yes, one of them was St. Petersburg. And these laws include things like you cannot demonstrate for gay rights in public.
Well, children might see you.
But in the annual May Day parade, which
Got a
is
picture of this.
very popular in Russia, 100 LGBT people marched with flags and demanded repeal of the law and not passing the national
There
law.
they
And there
are.
they are with all these rainbow flags
On May
and
Day.
signs and everything. And they were not arrested. They were not attacked.
Well, maybe they
and
believe
that's
in
a great thing.
integration. Maybe you just can't have a freestanding gay demonstration.
Maybe they just want to put the laws on the books and they don't really want
Come
to
on over
hassle
here and
people.
march in the St. Patrick's Day parade, where you would be thrown out.
And in Britain, they are talking to Kenya about giving reparations for the 1950s rape and torture of men and women during the independence struggle.
Including Barack Obama's father,
Yes, grandfather.
grandfather.
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, and this was the British troops who were trying to stop the independence movement, and they were raping men and women, raping men to humiliate them.
Oh, yeah, I love it when Newt Gingrich says that Obama's got an anti-colonialist mindset.
Yeah.
Hasn't that how this, isn't that how things get started?
Shouldn't we all have an anti-colonialist viewpoint?
Right.
Georgina Beyer, who was the first out transsexual member of parliament in New Zealand and I think worldwide, has announced that she has kidney failure, needs dialysis 4 times a week. She was going to run for the mayor of Wellington, New Zealand, but that looks like it's not going to happen.
All right. AIDS news?
Yes, big news in the New York Times. Corey Johnson, our sometimes guest host and candidate for the City Council of New York in the Chris Quinn seat that she will be vacating for term limits and her mayoral run, announced that he's HIV positive.
And has been for 9 years.
Yeah.
Again, we haven't talked to Corey yet about this, but I mean, people don't come out about this for the most part anymore because of the pills, maintaining their health and things like that.
Because
figure,
they don't
why should
look
we
sick
they don't-
anymore.
Right.
They don't
Which
run around.
complicates things in terms of doing prevention and everything, because people with AIDS have sort of disappeared. So I hope his coming out will help. It would be great if some people could acknowledge it, anytime. Although you don't expect people to go around saying, I have diabetes to employers and everybody else. But there it is.
No, but since he is running for office, he has talked about it, and in conjunction with Tom Duane, the former council member.
Who also
from
did this on the
district.
eve of the election,
A long time ago.
1991.
Yes, when it was a little scarier, because he, I think, was the first. Sean Strube ran for Congress upstate around the same time, and also was one of the first to announce he was HIV positive and running. And I want to alert you to something coming up in a week or about 10 days. They're going to do a special performance of the David Drake play, The Night Larry Kramer Kissed Me, which was...
With co-stars, even though it's a one-man show.
It's a one-man show, monologue about the AIDS crisis, but they're bringing in a lot of guest stars like Andre DeShields and B.D. Wong and Anthony Rapp, who are going to do this
sounds like
with
fun.
David Drake.
When is it?
May 20th at John Jay College across the street from
Okay,
here.
and it's also Hispanic Hepatitis Day is coming up. In fact, we've got a website there, HispanicHepatitisDay.org. May 15th, there's free hepatitis C screening in New York. But 3.2 million people are infected nationwide. 245,000 New Yorkers chronically infected. This is not just for Latinos, but everybody needs to be aware of that and get that vaccine if they need it.
Okay, moving on to entertainment news.
Yes.
Another thing I want to alert you to this weekend, released movie opening at the Quad. It's about the Fortune Society. We had our friend David Rothenberg here a few months ago, and it's based on his play The Castle, about 4 guys who had been released from prison and were leaving in the castle.
Women too.
Women too? Okay, you saw it, I
Yes.
didn't. So now there's the movie version called Released, opening at the Quad this weekend.
Look forward to that. And the much heralded American Repertory Theater's production of Glass Menagerie, which was out of town, is coming to Broadway in September, starring out-gay Cherry Jones, out-gay Zachary Quinto, who was considered the star of this show with what he did with the role of Tom, not to mention Celia Keenan-Borgia, who was so good in Peter and the Starcatcher.
We have just a couple of minutes. Do you want to get to your reviews?
Yeah, sure. I saw Bette Midler in I'll Eat You Last, where she plays the super agent Sue Mengers, who handled Barbra Streisand and all those kinds of things. It starts out sort of with Bette Midler being like Sophie Tucker, telling her jokes, but once
It's okay by me.
Okay, you'll enjoy it from the start. But once she gets into telling these show business stories, it's fascinating. It really is about the business.
I'm seeing it Friday night. Can't wait.
Okay. Be warned, this play contains profanity, smoking, alcohol consumption, drug use, and gossip.
Okay.
All right. And I saw the revival of Pippin. Now, this is by Stephen Schwartz. Never seen it before. It's got a very engaging star in it. It's very cutesy, though, and 2 hours and 45 minutes was a lot for me. So I wish they could have trimmed it a bit. I mean, it's got some good songs. This kid, Matthew James Thomas, as Pippin, is very good. Stephanie Pope played the leading player because Bettina Miller was out sick. And so some trimming would help. Andrea Martin, is it? Yes. She plays the grandmother. That's a showstopper at the end of the first act. Hang in there for that. And I saw 2 one-person song fests. One is about we have time?
Yep.
Out-gay cabaret star Mark Nadler. We have a picture of him.
Yep.
He takes us through the Weimar Republic playbook. Kurt Weill, people like that. It's very intensely personal. He's out. It's called I'm a Stranger Here Myself at the York Theater. It's educational and especially on gay aspects. And then the other one is from the Brits Off-Broadway series with, this is Jessica Walker there. This is called The Girl I Left Behind Me. These are male impersonators. Now, she takes us through, this is late 19th century, early 20th century, and she sings all these songs. She said the women sang them in their women's voices. They didn't try to pretend that they were men.
Yeah.
It got a very nice review in the Times. It's going to be less so from me. But it was highly educational, and I didn't really get what the allure of these performers was. But, anyway, that's it.
Well, I was at the Visual Aids annual dinner this week and saw a couple of performers I loved, Raven O and Molly Pope, downtown type performers, fantastic.
Yes.
Go see them if you can, anywhere they perform.
Okay.
And we will see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.